when I was in high school, I used to think, and I know this sounds crazy, I used to think that if I'm a nice guy, that I would have all my needs taken care of. I used to think this. I used to think if I'm a nice guy, there's no reason why other people wouldn't be nice to me. I can get whatever I want as long as I'm a nice guy. As long as I'm a nice guy, I'm good, right? And then as I got older, I realized that that obviously wasn't true, right? I realized that being a nice guy could be problematic, and it was problematic, at least for me, and I know I see it in a lot of other people. Being a nice guy can be problematic, especially in relationships, okay? Not necessarily romantic relationships, that's part of it, but just relationships in general. But I didn't understand this growing up. I didn't understand what was happening. I didn't understand the psychology of it until I got older. And in order to understand this, you need to realize how a nice guy is born. What is the origin of how do you make a nice guy? Where does it start, right? The origin of a nice guy, the origin of a nice guy starts in childhood. Okay? The psychology in your head is based on the heartbeat of your childhood. What happened to you as a child? And you need to understand these basic principles, okay? When you're a child, okay, and I can vouch for this when I worked with kids for over 10 years at elementary school. When you're a child, you're completely helpless. You're completely vulnerable, okay? You're 100% dependent on adults for guidance, right? You're trying to find your way in life. You're navigating in this new world. You're a child. You don't know what's going on. So you're dependent on adults, okay? This is why the number one fear of children is abandonment, okay? The number one fear of children is abandonment, when you leave them alone and they know that they're not equipped to be able to handle things by themselves, okay? Abandonment is something that haunts children. It's always lurking, right? What if I'm abandoned, right? They're completely dependent on adults, okay? So you also have a second principle, which is this idea that, as Carl Jung says, during the first half of your life, you're developing a healthy ego. And then the second half of your life is to slowly let go of your ego, right? But for that first half of your life, when it comes to your ego, the world revolves around you. As a child, you think the world revolves around you. And when you have these two things, a fear of abandonment, and you think that the world revolves around you, it's just me, right? You throw your tantrums. When you don't get your needs met, or when you're abandoned, you think it's because you're not important. Okay? So it's kind of like you feel that if there's any traumatic abandonment in your childhood, it's usually because you had needs that weren't met, that your needs was the cause or the root problem of your abandonment. Okay? And we all experience abandonment in some way or shape or form, right? It could be a missing parent, a missing family member. Just being dropped off in school during the first day is a form of abandonment, right? Your parents leave you, right? It's abandonment in your childhood that makes the child think, hey, your needs are not important. In fact, they were the root cause of your abandonment. So at that point, you start cultivating this need for validation. Okay, it's at the core of a nice guy psychology is this belief that you need to be validated and that you're not important. Okay, your needs are the root cause of your abandonment. This is the foundation of a nice guy archetype. Okay, it's a coping mechanism that rolls over to adulthood. Okay, you feel like you need validation as a child to avoid abandonment, right? So you put other people's needs before yours because your needs are not important. And this, unfortunately, rolls over to adulthood. Okay, and it's not a healthy thing. And I'm not saying don't be a nice guy. I'm saying you need to understand why you're being a nice guy. Okay, the world says you can't be who you are when you develop these patterns. Okay, it's patterns of powerlessness where you're seeking validation, And the danger to this is that when you're seeking validation from other people get to set the tone for your relationships because you need them. They don't need you. You need them. Okay? It sets you up for failure. Okay? Seeking people's validations by being the nice guy sets you up for failure. All right? It's especially problematic in romantic relationships. Okay? Because as a man, if you're the nice guy and you're doing it for all the wrong reasons, again, it's not being nice that's the issue, it's why you're being nice. A woman will get to decide your worth. She gets to decide the tone of the relationship. That isn't always 50-50. Okay? If you're treating a woman like a celebrity because you want her validation, she's going to treat you like one of her fans. Right? She's not going to meet you halfway there because she's in control. And you're being the nice guy. Right? Thinking that by doing this, you're going to get everything you want. Now, being a nice guy cuts really deep because as soon as you get subscribed to this idea that you need validation, you start trying to hide your mistakes, right? You try to hide your mistakes. You avoid conflict. You're afraid of confrontation. You're dishonest sometimes. You try to bury the truth in order to get validations because you're under this belief that if you're imperfect, no one's ever going to love you. Right? So there's manipulation involved. There's a form of manipulation involved where you sort of repress your feelings in order to get validation. So you put your own personal needs to the side in order to get approval. All right? And again, I'm not saying don't be a nice guy. I'm saying you need to understand why you're being a nice guy. Okay? There's a whole archetype of nice guy personalities. But at the root of it is basically a form of slavery. Okay? Being a nice guy on some level is a form of slavery. And let me tell you why. Okay? When you're a nice guy and you're non-confrontational, okay, you're basically telling the world that you're not capable of violence or you're not willing to use violence. And I'm not advocating violence, but you need to have the choice to use violence if it comes down to that. Okay? Somebody who's a slave means they don't have a choice. Okay? A slave doesn't have a choice. You need to have a choice. I'm either peaceful or I'm violent. But you need to have the option. I'm either peaceful or I'm violent. But if you take the violence out and you can only be peaceful, it's monopolized. You don't have a choice. You have to be peaceful. Even when the time doesn't call for it. Okay? In other words, you need to be capable of violence in order for you to have a choice. And when you're not capable of violence because you're a nice guy, okay, and you're subscribed to that philosophy, then you're boxed into this form of slavery. Okay, again, I'm not preaching violence here. I think it was Jordan Peterson who said, a harmless man is not a good man. A good man is a very dangerous man who has it under voluntary control. Okay? There's a need for choice. Okay? You have to be very mindful of why you're being a nice guy. Okay? Oftentimes being a nice guy is that you give to get mentality. Okay? It's like an ultimatum. Like I give and I give, so I expect something in return. Right? Especially when it comes to women, a lot of these nice guys expect something in return. Like if I'm nice to you, maybe you'll love me. Or maybe I can have a relationship with you. So it doesn't come from a place of authenticity where you're genuinely being nice to the person. You're doing it with a form of schemery. Like this is going to pay off later. Right? It's insecurity. Right? So have you ever seen a nice guy get frustrated because he's being nice to the girl and she doesn't reciprocate? Okay? It's coming from a place of insecurity. They're trying to get validation, right? And there's unspoken strings attached. Like when a nice guy is nice to a girl, there's unspoken strings attached, right? Again, it's not being nice that's the problem. It's why are you being nice? Are you doing it for validation? Are you hoping to get something out of it? Or is it generally authentic because you're just a nice person, right? You have to understand the psychology of this. Oftentimes, when when you look at a nice guy, there's a danger because what they're really doing is that they're being very secretive of what it is that they're doing. And I've seen this play out time and time again. Nice guys being nice to people or women, expecting something in return, but they're manipulating or scheming, or they're hiding their true humanity because they're afraid to show their imperfections, right? They're afraid to show their flaws. They think if I show the world, people, my flaws, they're not gonna love me. There's no way. So I have to bury the truth. I have to cover it all up, right? It's schemery, it's manipulation, it's sabotage, right? I'm gonna do something and hopefully I get back. There's a lot of layers to it, right? It's the farthest thing from being authentic. And that's what people notice, that you're not being authentic. Especially women, you'll be socially radioactive. As soon as you stop being authentic and there's some sort of uh sabotage, foul play, schemery going on, kind of hidden agenda, they can see that. They can see that, right? You have to teach kids early on to value themselves and not be codependent on other people for their self-worth. You see what I'm saying? It's like I said, it's a combination of a fear of abandonment as a child, which is healthy. Everybody has a fear of abandonment. But then there's a perversion that happens in childhood where if you do experience a form of abandonment in any way, shape, or form, you feel that your needs is the culprit. You had needs that weren't met, and that's the reason why you were abandoned. Okay? Uh there's a really good book that breaks this down very beautifully. It's called um No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. I could be wrong, but I think it's Robert Glover. No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. Okay, it's gonna speak volumes to you if this fascinates you or you feel like you can have a greater takeaway from this. I highly recommend it. At the end of the day, it is what it is. It's gonna be what it's gonna be, and that's life.